Hi there, this is Mark McRae and some more tips from the trenches. So Jeff Bezos says in an interview that I watched recently that really when he was the CEO and in charge of Amazon, he was really paid for making one or two big decisions per year. In other words, his main function was to make good decisions. And all through my business career, I've always tried to make a framework for making decisions. And eventually I've got it down to a kind of formulaic way of approaching how to make good decisions. So here's what I've learned so far. 95% of all problems should be solved immediately. In other words, you shouldn't overthink them. Somebody comes to you with a problem, there's a problem in business, make a decision. You don't have to overthink it. Number two, is the decision easily reversible? So let's say that you've been presented with a problem, you have to make a decision, you're slightly worried about it. Ask yourself, can the problem be reversed? Can the decision be reversed? If it can, don't overthink it. Just make the decision because you can always reverse the decision. If the problem is solved, how would it impact my business? Sometimes people will spend a long time on making a decision that's really not that important. So is it going to make any kind of impact on your business before you spend a lot of time thinking about it? If it has little impact, then make a decision or delegate. Don't make big decisions when you are in any kind of emotional state. It doesn't matter how level-headed you are, there will be occasions where you are in more of a flow, more of a zone than in other times. But if you know you just had some argument with somebody, you've had an argument with the wife, whatever it is, if you know you're not yourself, don't make big decisions. So make sure you kind of feel that you're having a productive day when you're well rested. Then that's when you should make a decision. Think like a consultant. In other words, if you were to hire a consultant for your business, what would happen is they would come in and they would look at your business from a 60,000-foot view. So they look at things and they kind of depersonalize decisions. So depersonalize the decision-making process and try and make it as logical as possible. So not from a position of desperation or need. The last thing is don't make a decision if you feel rushed. Being rushed is one of the main reasons people feel stressed because they don't have enough time to analyze the information and think about the problem so that they can make a good decision. If I have a kind of automatic thing where if people try and put me under pressure to make a decision that I know needs more thought, that my automatic response is just no. Right? If you really have to put me in a corner and throw rocks at me, I won't make that decision. I need time sometimes. So now one thing is you have to clarify the question. Right? So that if you're presented with a problem, it can come to you in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it will come to you and it's a very yes and no, and sometimes it will come to you and it's a mixture of information. So one of the first things to do is to clarify the question. Then, what's the problem, not the symptom? So a few days ago, I was in a bit of a dilemma because I was spending some time looking at copy from our copywriting team. It was taking more time than I would have liked. But the fact that it took more time is a symptom. The problem is I shouldn't be doing that in the first place. So make sure you're addressing the problem and not the symptom. Something else to consider are what are the second order consequences. Sometimes you'll make a decision and you haven't thought through how that affects everything else around you. What are the second order consequences from that decision? How does it affect your other departments, the other people, or your clients? What are the second order decisions? And one way to do that is to, how will this decision look 3 days from now, 3 weeks from now, 3 months from now? Then ask yourself, what's the upside and downside of this decision? If there's a good upside, that can weigh your opinion in one way. And if there is a downside, can you live with the downside? Another way to look at it is who, not how, do I solve the problem? Many companies I see, they will spend an inordinate amount of time trying to figure out how to solve a problem rather than find who has solved this problem before. Who is the person that can solve this problem for me? That usually shortcuts what you have to do if you can see, who has the answer, not how do I solve the problem. So I have this dream team of people. If I could, it's kind of like a fantasy board for football, but if I had my perfect team, it would comprise of David Goggins, Andrew Carnegie, Julius Caesar, Orson Welles, Winston Churchill, Charlie Munger, and Warren Buffett. What would my dream team do? Because each of those people have a personality trait, and if I approach their personality trait to the problem, how would they solve the problem? Something I got from a Charlie Munger interview was invert the problem. And that means reverse it. What would happen if you did everything wrong? In other words, if you had a problem, you didn't solve the problem, and in fact you went the opposite way, what would happen? Because sometimes when you look at a problem from another angle, it can help you solve the problem. If you are going to go through this process and to solve problems, it might be a big problem, but don't just solve it once. Build the machine, not a temporary solution. In other words, you might be faced with that problem at some time in the future. You might be faced with that problem on a reoccurring basis. So build a framework where you and anybody else who has that problem can solve that problem. Once you've gone through all of that, give yourself some options. What is option 1? What is option 2? What is option 3? And the more options you have, the better. But eventually, once you've, contemplated the problem, once you've looked at it logically, once you've consulted with your team, once you really know and understand that problem, what are the solutions, what are the options you have, and then come up with a solution. If you go through that process, it will help you make less bad decisions. It will not stop you from having bad decisions, because business is kind of like golf. It's not about hitting every shot perfectly. It's about hitting more good shots than bad shots and being consistent. And this is a way that might help you be consistent. Anyway, I hope you liked this tip. If you did, the best place to get me is on YouTube. And if you're there, give me a like or subscribe or a comment if you thought it was useful. Thanks for listening, guys.